Welcome to Cars on Call. I am automotive journalist and gastroenterologist Steve Schutz. I'm here with trauma surgeon Stefan Moran, automotive connoisseur, collector, and historian Adam Hudson. We have a special guest who we'll get to in a little bit. Stefan will introduce him, but we got to start the show with some news. And Stefan, you and I talked about 6 months ago. There's an announcement from Dodge, and they said, hey, the Challenger and Charger are going away. The last one will be made in December of this year. And then all of a sudden, they're like, we meant July. So we've got like 10 more days of Challenger and Charger.
Terrible. I don't know if they're not, it makes me wonder, are they not getting the pre-orders that they thought they were going to get on this vehicle? I can't imagine that, from a profit standpoint for the company, that they would not continue to sell pre-orders on them. But apparently they're going to stop selling them, all the big monster motors. I don't know, kind of sad that it's beginning of the death of the ice age. Here we are, permafrost is collapsing around the world and all the big V8s are falling into it. But at least we got the Mustang still to come out, with the Dark Horse come out. So Ford's going to give a last hurrah to the big V8s, and hopefully, I don't know. What do you think, Steve? Do you think that there's just not the money rolling in on these? I don't get it.
They're selling them. I think there's something going on with Stellantis, which is the parent company of Dodge, and emissions. And they have restricted the sale of non-hybrid Jeeps in California, and there's like 9 states that follow California emissions.
Even in Alabama, we don't give a shit about that. I mean,
yeah. But what I mean is that Stellantis itself has limited the amount of just internal combustion engine Jeeps, Jeep Wranglers that are sold in these California states. And I think Stellantis has, I think, a unique emissions problem. Ford is having no trouble selling Broncos there. I think it's related to that. Adams, do you know any more or have any other ideas?
I do not, unless it has something to do with, their wide-reaching European standards that they're trying to reach, with Jeeps and there are other makes overseas. I'm not sure, but I tell you, man, I look at that picture and who would have thought that, something you look at and go, wow, that's so beautiful. And now you're looking at it, like figuratively and literally riding into the sunset. And we weren't really given ample warning of the funeral. It's like, okay, you've got time enough to sort of do a pre-order. And I looked online the day you sent that, and there were 71 available in the US. And that's not a small number. And these were new cars, by the way, just advertised. And so I don't know, Steve, you keep up with the new industry more. I would imagine their profit margin on these is decently strong, but boy, just to have dropped the hammer on it that abruptly does make you wonder.
Yeah, it's like the old joke about the guy who died. Someone says, Joe died, and the other guy goes, died, and he didn't even know he was sick. And that's where we are with this one. Just, we knew that there was a deadline. We knew it was coming, but they changed it. Like I said, this announcement was made in July, saying we're not going to make any more after July. So, and speaking of death, a great man died, Reeves Callaway, and he died at the age of 75. And he was a great figure in automotive in the 1980s. We had not very good performance cars, and all of a sudden Reeves Callaway came along and started making these amazing cars. Adams, I'll let you list them, but he died at 75. One thing I didn't know, he actually started his company at the age of 29. He was 29 years old when he started his company in 1977, first working on BMW 3 Series, and then he worked with BMW, Volkswagen, Mercedes, Porsche, Audi, and Alfa. And finally, in 1987, it was GM only. Before you guys talk about Reeves Callaway, I want to say just a word about his father. I think it's hard if you have a very successful father to be successful. I think,
I'll explain to our guest who his father was.
Yeah, his father was Eli Callaway. Reeves Callaway was actually Eli Callaway III. His father was Eli Callaway II. And his father made his first fortune in textiles back in the 60s. And then he decided to open a winery, which was wildly successful, and he sold it for a huge profit in the 80s. And then he went into golf and he created Callaway Golf.
The
So
Big
his
Bertha.
the Big Bertha was their most successful product, but Callaway Golf, which he founded in the 80s, it was incredibly successful. So his son comes along and in a whole different industry was almost as successful. It's really remarkable.
It is,
is
yes.
remarkable.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Well, they, you know, what I read is that his father did not just say, "Here's a fortune, go out and blow it." I mean, he was very disciplined with his son, and starting a long string of highly entrepreneurial endeavors in automobiles. He was not quite as far-reaching or different, you know, diversified as was his dad. They were mostly automotive, at least all engine-based automotive. He did boats and cars, and like Steve said, you know, the Alfa Romeo, Aston Martin, an Indy car, a Formula car. He had 2 entries in Le Mans. He was most famous with the Corvette. He started off with BMW, like you said, at 19 years old, and got press when that was the big thing to get, you know, somebody that young to get written up in I think it was Don Sherman writing for maybe Car and Driver.
Yes.
Yep.
And he put a turbo kit on a BMW 320i, which was an anemic little successor to the BMW 2002. And he got national press, and he sold about 500 kits for BMWs, Volkswagen, Porsche, and Audi. That's pretty enterprising. So he did not need dear old dad's money for much longer. And I don't know, it's just an incredible story. Like I said, Steve, you got 2 stars in the same family in wildly different enterprises doing really, really good.
Yeah, well, you know, sadly, he died. He fell at home, and he must have had some kind of a head injury, but he died unexpectedly after a fall, which is kind of sad. Taken out kind of still in his prime, but
Yeah,
I have great.
I
Go
have
ahead,
just
Shiva.
amazing memories, because, you know, these are following the days of the late 70s, early 80s, when the Corvette had, you know, like 180 horsepower in a Corvette. It was so ridiculous. And getting power it seemed like it was impossible. It was a dark age. And then you started to get into the 80s, and all of a sudden this dude I remember the Corvette Sledgehammer that he made it was the late 80s. It went like 220 miles an hour, which was impossible.
It was impossible, and actually with longer gearing, it did 254. You know, we thought it was all, you know, that was the realm of what we consider now, you know, Koenigsegg and Bugatti, et cetera, and Pagani or Bugatti, Pagani, and Koenigsegg. But 254 miles an hour back then, you know, that's just phenomenal. Steph, run back up there and show that we won't dwell on him for the rest of the show, of course, but I think it's interesting. The Alfa Romeo, folks, he did a twin turbo of this car in 1986. Now, we didn't really start hearing about twin turbos out of manufacturers till a bit later. And here's this independent, you know, this dude out of his old Lime, Connecticut shop building a twin turbo on a fairly exotic motor, fortunately a relatively understressed motor. And I think that was the thing, if I read it correctly, that Dave McClellan, who was the head of engineering with Corvette, saw that this little 2.5 liter V6 was outperforming his big fat V8 Corvette. And he thought, we need to put a stop to this, boys. You know, so he contacts Reeves Callaway. By the way, check out that awesome hood scoop on that Alfa. But that's when Corvette and he shook hands, because he sort of embarrassed the big bore people right under their noses with a car that was outrunning them. So then he starts off, and it was a factory option on a Corvette. You could check a box B2K and have a Callaway twin engine, better brakes, better suspension, some tweaks to the transmission, different wheels, etc. And that would be a factory option car. And Steve, I don't know if I was trying to put together production numbers. Over time, he sold about 500 of the Corvettes. I don't know. It sounded a little low. Do you know any differently?
It's got to be a lot more than that. I would say maybe the first year was 500, but he sold tons of them. And actually, coincidentally, I haven't seen a Callaway Corvette many years, but I saw a C6 generation Callaway Corvette about a block from my house 2 days ago or 3 days ago, just
wow.
parked in front of a hotel. And it's so
Wow.
cool. It's distinctive in that it doesn't say Corvette in the back. It says Callaway in the back. It is, it's a Callaway car, and you have Callaway badges. The story about GM, which I wasn't familiar with that story, Adams, but it reminds me of a line from a poster I have in my office, and that is, if you can't beat them, join them, then beat them. And that's what he did. And
Yeah.
you guys were saying that there's a red Callaway C7 Corvette, which you have up. I think it's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. You guys think it's good looking?
Dude, that thing is so cool, man. That is like
What?
the ultimate
It's
shooting
awful.
brake.
Steve, you're gonna need to get those glasses detailed. That thing is fantastic.
This is the
I
Aero
love
wagon, man. This thing is so cool.
And look at that, for adding 50 grand worth of body work, you can store 2.3 more cubic feet of stuff in it. I love it. I love that roof line. I think that's terrific.
I think it's so cool.
It's a Callaway Kardashian.
Baby's got back. I mean, but I like it though.
Pop on up to that C12, Steph. Now that I'm running you around, we're gonna show
the
what
C12.
I think.
That car would only look good in purple.
Is this the C12?
Steve, does that meet with your approval? Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Okay, yep. And folks, if you're not looking at it, boy, you really need to do the visuals, because what Callaway did here with his designer is, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, he out Corvetted Corvette.
Yep.
He on a C5, he made this beautiful car, which I think, in my humble opinion, to be the second prettiest production vet ever, behind Bill Mitchell's fabulous C2. I mean, I think that thing looks fantastic. And the back end is just as good looking. I don't guess we have a photo with that, and it does not matter. But I just think that was super handsome. That's the road going version of what he entered in Le Mans, which took the pole at Le Mans, but it broke in the race.
Yeah, I think that maybe the thing he has in common with his father is, or something he got from his father and from his growing up that may have helped him, is that if you're a rich kid, you uniquely know what rich guys want. And he knew it. He came out with these cars and they sold. And of course, they're all going to rich guys.
Very cool.
Well,
all right, what's next?
Car spotting is next, Adams. As usual, this is fantastic. And I'm grateful, as I'm sure Stefan is, that you did not pick an Isuzu this time.
Yeah.
I don't even know what you picked. So
oh,
is this one of the pictures you sent me?
I'm the one that doesn't read emails, Stefan.
I read the first line.
Do any of us read the emails? I'm gonna need to start coming to practice more. I'm just sorry. This week's car spotting, and long live the entrepreneurial spirit of Reeves Callaway, before we depart on that. And here is a car vastly different from anything that Reeves Callaway ever did, but it has something in common, which it was a first among its ilk, the International Harvester Scout. That particular one is the Travelall. That's the big old huge four-door. That thing so predated the Suburbans and the big huge monster SUVs that we consider today. They originally launched that back in the 50s. And there's the latest version of the international, the ladder, the
two-door version. Yep.
Yeah, with plastic cladding, for jumping over the sand dunes and lightening up the vehicle and all that. And International Scout made industrial equipment, or International made industrial equipment. And then they got into automobiles right after the war, and they wanted to build a better Jeep. So they decided to do a Scout. And the Scout, you just kind of like look at the front end of that. And Steph, there may be another photo I sent separately, and do not strain yourself, Tim. You're doing enough simultaneously. There's another Scout hanging out there somewhere. But the the Scout was built with more curves. They'd originally designed it to be completely slab slided and sided and flat, and it looked way too much like the Jeep in their opinion. And so this designer had decided, he said, well, look, let's just make it out of plastic. So they were going to make the body panels out of plastic. And so they were able to do these little curvatures. Well, then the price to build it out of plastic, because that was the big rage all in the 50s. The price to do it was too much. So they said, okay, well, we love the design. Let's make it out of metal. And it was designed by a gentleman named Ted Ornas, American designer. And after he got the go ahead to do it, they ended up selling 523,000 Scouts from like 61 to 80. So about a 20-year production. Yeah, and that's one I just actually saw just at a service shop. I was there getting tires, and that vehicle was just sitting there. And that's of course the soft top one. And you could get them with the hard top. You could get the 4-door, which was the Travelall. And they had pretty pathetic motors. They had inline sixes, and even had a diesel that was an inline Nissan diesel that was offered inline six. And then they had a 304 V8, a 345 V8, and a 392 V8. And even though those numbers are similar to other manufacturers, they were all of their own design. So the 304 was not the AMC 304, it was International's 304. And they were, I had a Travelall for about a year. And it was a little bit difficult to start when it was hot, but then it countered that because it was also difficult to start when it was cold.
That's great.
It had like 150 horsepower, and the thing was 7 blocks long. I mean, it was just really, really slow, but it was cool looking. I got comments on it all the time. Like, what is that? What a neat vehicle. So we would probably expect these to do some value bounce. They sort of have already, but they're sort of like I would assume an entry level to the Bronco mania.
So I've got a Scout story.
Cool.
Back in we're probably talking, I was probably about maybe 6th grade. So 1973, we're living in Gahanna, Ohio. And my dad was the Air Force ROTC instructor at Kaplan University. And one of his students was older, had served a couple tours in Vietnam, Vietnam. Doug Geddes was his name, who came back to school to get his degree, and then served his career in the military, went on to become a minister, Episcopalian minister. But Doug came over to the house. He was big into hunting, and he had the Scout International Harvester, the little Scout. And we went off-roading. And my brother and I thought it was the most insane thing ever to take something off the paved road. And we went through the dirt and up and down hills where they're doing construction. And it was a life-changing moment. And then later on, this picture here that we have show up that red Jeep in the background. I had a red CJ7 that was built in 1979 that my dad bought. And then when they moved back to France, I had it. So I have very fond memories of the International Harvester Scout. I saw Broncos back then, but if I were to get a vintage 4x4 Bronco, I would have to go with the Scout, because it's kind of like me riding in the Maserati Quattroporto as a kid with Claude going to Cannes. I've got memories that his was white, but I remember saying this is the coolest thing ever to go four-wheeling, and I love them.
I'm glad that being such a Ford guy, for you to say you'd pick that over the Bronco, that's like a triple endorsement.
Yeah.
There was it was the Blazer, the Bronco, the Jeep, but don't forget the Dodge Ram Charger. It was all kind of in the same thing. My memory of those vehicles, I would see Scouts on the beach. So I lived very close to Long Island Sound. So you'd have these Scouts or it was mostly Scouts, Broncos, or Blazers, occasional Ram Charger. I didn't see many Jeeps, but they had white spoked wheels, and then these guys would fish. And I remember at the time thinking, geez, these guys just sitting around doing nothing but fishing. As I got older, I'm like, that's pretty good. Pretty good way to spend the day.
No kidding.
But yeah, you were allowed to drive on the beach. I'm sure you still are in lots of places. And so it was really cool.
Let's not forget the Toyota FJ poking its presence in there. And Steve, It's funny you mentioned that about seeing them on the beach. Of course, I live down here in Florida on the beach, and I see those regularly cruising around, parked at shops, at bait stores, wherever they are, boat landings, and they're obviously running. I don't see a lot of restored ones, but they're generally basically rusted out. The floorboards have been hammered on, and riveted with new ones and all that stuff. They still run.
The Bronco has been having a moment for about almost 10 years. Blazer has started to be cool. The C10 era Blazer has been cool for about 3 or 4 years. Maybe it's the Scout's turn. The Scout's a great name. I've always thought the Scout is a great name. And I think it's interesting. The name was purchased by Volkswagen. There's a new division of Volkswagen coming called Scout. It's going to have vehicles that look a little bit like that Scout, only of course updated. Modern SUVs are going to be all electric, and they are going to be built in South Carolina.
Interesting. You're saying you feel like its looks will pay homage to the original Scout?
There's been a rendering that's been making the rounds, and it does kind of echo the Scout proportionally, but of course it's going to be very updated, and again, all electric. But I think they bought the name because it's a great name.
It's a great name, and I don't know, it's short, it's to the point, and it's got a good mark in American history too. Volkswagen did well with it.
Yeah, everybody, when the Germans bought Mini and when they bought Rolls-Royce, everybody's kind of worried, and the Germans were not going to pay homage to the nameplate and the history, and they did, and they turned those into very successful companies. So I'm super excited that Audi's coming in with Scout, and they're going to resurrect it, and people aren't going to care where the thing was built, or that it's the Germans own it. It's going to be the Scout, and that name. And I think just like the Bronco, they will definitely take a niche market. It's going to be cool. It's going to be an EV. And I think as long as they can do like the Bronco design, kind of keep the old style look to it, I think they'll do great.
I think it'd be even better to harken back to how we started this show, to take the Hellcat motor,
yeah,
Scout, then you got a vehicle.
Yeah. I think putting a Hellcat in anything is great. So you're absolutely right. I wish they would, but obviously it's going to be all electric, which is kind of a downer, but
a little bit of a downer.
A little bit of a downer, less personality. But yeah, Scout with a Hellcat, that'd be fantastic. So anyway, moving on, I'm going to let Stefan introduce our special guest. We're all very excited to hear from this very interesting individual.
So I'm very excited. We've got Dustin Passeur on the show with us today, and I got inspired by episode 69 with Julie Alt. The patient that called me, who survived a horrific crash. She had a torn aorta. She got flown by helicopter. I talked about helicopter transport of injured vehicles. Injured patients. And so I reached out to the company Airevac, and I have their insurance. I said, do you have somebody that we could talk to? So they found Dustin, and I'm looking at, I have not seen Dustin in a long time, but when we got him on Zoom today, I immediately recognized him from my old Huntsville hospital days. So, down here in Alabama, how do you pronounce your last name, Dustin?
Sure.
But, in the French, we said Dustin Passeur.
Yeah.
Thank you for not introducing him that way.
Yeah. So Dustin is a flight nurse on Airevac. So he flies on the helicopters, as he's got that, for listeners that are watching as well, he's got on a super cool flight suit with patches. And I couldn't wear my flight suit today. So I've got my golf shirt on that Steve gave me, but I'm excited to have Justin here. So this is going to be, I had the patient, Julie came on, I talked about taking care of her. Now we're going to keep bringing this loop back together. We're going to talk about, emergency responders and air evacuation of the injured. And Julie Alt would have died had she not been transferred by helicopter. She had a horrific injury. Time was not on her side. She needed every moment to get to the hospital to get her injury taken care of. She had an injury of which 80-90% of the people die before they even get to the hospital. And then over that 80% of them die in the hospital with their injuries. So she was saved by a helicopter. My wife had a horrific crash. She was thrown from a horse in Colorado. We called the helicopter. She was flown. She had multiple internal organ injuries. She would not have done as well as she did without that. I've had 3 lake friends who were transported by air. One had a life-threatening medical issue, had a heart attack. Unfortunately, he passed after a week in the hospital. But I had 2 other friends that were injured and were flown. And we don't think we see the helicopter flying over all the time. And let me tell you why this is important. We'll talk some more about this later. But first of all, you need it if you're gravely injured in a motor vehicle collision. Because if you crash on the interstate 565, 65, or in your city, it's going to shut down traffic in all directions. And you got to get to the hospital if you're badly injured, and you need the helicopter. But the downside of that is you're going to get the bill in the mail. And we have the bill for $45,000. I almost passed out. My wife, I still would have spent it on my wife if I had to. But I had the insurance, and Justin's going to talk a little bit later on about what it cost. So, and I want to take it back a little bit here. Some of us are old enough to remember the TV show MASH. The Korean War was the first time that we started flying patients in helicopters to get them to a high level of care. Quickly realized that that's the way to go. Time, they talk about the golden hour in trauma. It's true. You got to get to the hospital quick. If you're bleeding and dying, you got to get to the hospital. There's nothing else to save you. So we got Dustin on the show. I'm super excited. He is a flight nurse on Airevac. Their parent company is Global Medical Response. So Dustin, welcome to the show, and tell us about you, yourself, where you grew up, and how you got into wanting to be a flight nurse, which is a risky proposition, a risky occupation. And tell us about the GMR as well, Global Medical Response.
All right. Well, first, thanks for having me, all you guys. Pleasure to be here. So again, my name is Dustin Passeur. I'm a flight nurse and paramedic at Airevac. I'm based up in Northeast Alabama. That doesn't mean that I don't work other bases in the company footprint, but my home base is in Scottsboro. So how I kind of got into this, when I was in high school, I really thought I wanted to be a firefighter. Like, that was, nothing else mattered. Algebra class didn't matter. It was just being a firefighter. And to do that, one thing I had to do was become an EMT basic. So straight out of high school, I went to EMT basic school. And while I was in EMT basic school, I said, I think I kind of like this. I think I'll go on to paramedic school. And so I did. Ended up totally abandoning the firefighter idea altogether. My dad was a career firefighter, retired from the fire department. So anyways, I became a paramedic, worked on the ambulance in Madison County, Alabama for 8 years. Yeah, 8 years. During that time, I got picked up by Airevac as a flight paramedic, and then went to nursing school, and here we are today. I'm a flight nurse and paramedic with Airevac Life Team, and I love it.
So in your day-to-day, so I don't think a lot of people understand how there's a flight crew on call. You're sleeping at the place. The helicopter's out on the pad. The call comes in Alabama. It would come in through the Birmingham Regional Emergency Medical System. The call would come out, and then you jump out. I guess you just jump out of bed, run in and jump in the helicopter.
Well, so I'll kind of give you a little day in the life. So shift changes at 6:30. So we get there at 6:30 or before. We start off the day by checking the temperatures on our blood products, making sure all the blood products are in date. We look over the helicopter, make sure everything's on board the helicopter. Everything's in date on the aircraft. We've got oxygen on board. Basically, all the supplies that we need to go about our day. After that, we'll get a safety briefing from the pilot. It kind of gives us an idea of weather patterns for the day, general maintenance things upcoming on the aircraft, just a general broad outlook of the day, just so everybody's on the same page. But yeah, past that, we're at work for 24 hours at a time typically. And I like to kind of equate it to being a firefighter. So you're on shift. If you don't have a call, you're free to do your continuing education, what have you, base chores, whatever. But when we get the call, of course, we're gonna make sure it's safe to go on the call. And then
So I got a question let me interrupt you, Dustin. So I was gonna safe to go on a call. So years ago, when I was working in the trauma bay, I was talking with I was talking with the pilot, and I said, sometimes you're going to get these calls that you got to fly. The weather's not good. And he said, don't worry about it, Doc. They don't tell me what I'm going after. They just say, can you fly? Yes or no. And he said they figured it out that if they say, hey, we've got a car crash, we've got a baby, we've got a kid who's injured, we've got a pregnant woman who's injured, we got to go pick up a neonate who's dying, you're going to alter your opinion whether or not you want to fly in that weather, because you're in a high risk aviation occupation. And is that true that the pilots they just have to say, I can fly, yes or no? Or do they know what they're going after, which may alter their opinion?
So I can't speak for other companies. All I can speak for is Airevac.
Right.
But no, we do not know the nature of a call when we get.
I think that is so important. It really is.
Yeah, we don't know the nature of a call until we get in the air and en route. But as far as back up to saying, is it safe to go? Everybody that goes out on that helicopter, all 3 crew members, the pilot and 2 medical crew members, must agree that yes, it is safe to go. If one person does not feel good about it for whatever reason, we're gonna turn the flight down in the name of safety and reevaluate later. But
in the military, that's in the civilian aviation, it's called crew resource management training. And and it's very important that when you've got crew, that all crew members feel that they can speak equally, be respected. And I like the fact that you guys do that, have CRM training like that. And it's all 3 yes or go, because, if you say no or you decide, well, I can't speak my opinion, and the pilot goes, he's putting you at risk as well as the other person in the aircraft. So.
Yeah, when we onboard new employees, and it's a lengthy process when we onboard new employees, but a lot of it is focused on aviation safety. And of course, there's clinical aspect of it too. But what I try to hammer home when we have a new employee is we must be safe. You must be able to speak your mind and feel safe about it, or feel okay about it. And the old adage is, if you see something, say something.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, compared with all other forms of aviation, the helicopters are involved in about twice the number of fatal accidents per 100,000 flight hours. What you guys are doing is dangerous. I mean, that's the bottom line. And we know there's a big study that came out that showed that the medical helicopter pilots flying under instruments in bad conditions are 7.54 times more likely to be involved in a fatal accident. And then you guys have, post-crash fire because you're flying with fuel. So I admire your company really staying ahead of this, and especially the CRM part. You have to continue to do that. In Alabama, we're not immune to having aircraft go down. When I was on call at Huntsville, we had an aircraft go down. And I think our last crash, Dustin, correct me, is this right? 2016 was the last one in Coffee County. We had 3 people. We had plane air ambulance go down in 16.
Familiar with that one.
Yeah. And then we had another crash in 19. And then last summer we had a helicopter go down in Andalusia, injured 3. But it's a risky business. So do you feel that when you get in this helicopter, do you feel that angst that what you're doing is you're trying to save somebody, but you don't want to go down in the process.
I don't feel angst. Our culture at Airevac and really global medical response as a whole is one of safety. So, you know, we take as many precautions as we can to mitigate the risk. Every job is risky, but you know, we take every precaution we can to mitigate the risk. In my history at Airevac, it has been a safe job. I think I had a more dangerous job when I worked on an ambulance. You know, since you talk about seatbelts a lot, you know, in the back of an ambulance, seatbelts are there, but they're, you know, historically have been, especially when I was younger, have been you know, kind of a suggestion, and that's unfortunate.
Exactly.
We all know what loose objects do in a rollover; they just become projectiles, and that includes people. So, I think my job at Airevac is safer than previous jobs I've had in EMS.
Wow.
But yeah.
Dustin, I'm gonna jump in here with what's going to be a very, very basic question. I'm gonna let Stefan and Steve possibly ask a little bit more medically aimed questions. However, first of all, thank you for what you're doing, because it sounds like in your early days you were like you wanted to be a firefighter, and then you changed over to this, and it just sounded like Dustin was destined to save lives. So thank you for what you've done. I mean, that's just remarkably brave of you, and you consider yourself, you know, just doing a service. But I mean, Lord knows you've impacted some families, no question about it. What does it here now to the kind of dumb question? You've got the ultimate democracy of three people who any one of the three can say, nope, not going to do it. Is it largely weather related, or are there other things that would cause you to say, we don't think it's safe to go?
You know, I don't have exact stats on why bases decline flights, but in my experience, it has been weather related, and
Okay.
usually everybody's in agreement anyways that no, this is not something that we need to be out of. You know, of course, there could be other factors. You know, there's a lot of reasons why people would be distracted or otherwise feel unsafe to do that particular flight.
Gotcha. Okay.
Hey, Dustin, Stefan has spoken in the past about the changes in vehicles on the road and how that's impacted him in the operating room. Bigger cars, more trucks, more, you know, instead of station wagons, people have Suburbans, and instead of instead of a car, they'll drive a pickup truck. And he's spoken a lot about the impact on that. It's something I hadn't thought about until he brought it up. Have you seen in your career as it's evolved changes related to the types of cars, and what kind of people do you pick up? I mean, we focus on car accidents here or car crashes, but it's obviously not just that.
Right. So your first question, you know, I haven't really picked up on what maybe there is a trend, but I haven't really seen. I saw more cars earlier in my career versus trucks now, or what have you. But what I have noticed, I started my career in 2007, and I have noticed the changes in technology on vehicles that make them the safety technologies that, you know, that are implemented. So crumple zones, side curtain airbags, dash airbags, you know, what have you. So there's been different safety technologies come about in my career that, whereas say in 2007, I look at a car crash and I think, dang, that person should be dead, and you know, they could be. But today, when you see the same kind of damage on a vehicle, they're walking around fine.
Wow.
So, you know, and then I'm sorry, what was your other question? I got distracted by the first one.
You did a good job on the first one.
Right. We talk about car crashes, and obviously I want you to say something about motorcycles, but What else is there? Is there overdoses and stuff that you go see, or what else do you pick up?
So again, I don't have the exact stats, and every base is different. We've got over 150 bases in 15 states. So at Airevac alone. So every base is different, but at our base, typically we see more scene flight type calls. So, an ambulance goes out on a call, they call a helicopter versus interfacility transfers. And I would venture to guess that, a third of our calls are trauma, a third of our calls are STEMIs, and a third of our calls are strokes, with some other.
The STEMI for listeners, that's a heart attack, basically.
Yeah, sorry.
STEMI. So crashes, heart attacks, and strokes.
Yes.
Not even.
So with some other type medical things here and there sprinkled in, but those are the big three things that we see in our area. So, and you mentioned motorcycles. Motorcycle wrecks. There is no telling what will happen in a motorcycle wreck. I mean, usually a patient will come detached from the motorcycle and go a certain way away from the motorcycle, depending on how fast or what they hit. So variety of injuries occur from motorcycle crashes, especially the ones that don't wear helmets, which there are helmet laws here in Alabama and Tennessee where we fly. But, not everybody adheres to laws either. So,
Yeah.
Hey, Dustin, have you ever had, Julie All was on the program, we had her episode 69, and she reached out of nowhere in 21 years and called me to thank me. Have you had patients reach out to you, to your team, and come back and thank you for what you did?
I can recall one patient that did, and he didn't thank me directly because I was off work the day that he came in. So, but the message was passed to me, and I don't know how graphic we can be here on this podcast, but basically had some just terrible, terrible leg injuries to the point we were pretty sure that an amputation was going to happen, later on in his care. Turns out it didn't happen. They salvaged his legs, and he walked into the station to want to thank the crew that transported him. Unfortunately, we weren't there, but that is probably the one I remember the most, because that was a graphic scene that we were on. But luckily he did well. He is able to keep his legs and go on about his life and hopefully live a happy life.
Hey, Dustin, Stefan has also spoken very eloquently about the stress on the surgical team that he works on. You see so many difficult scenes and so many horrific injuries. It kind of weighs on you, and the stress adds up. How much of that do you see, and how do you deal with it?
Well, there is a lot of acute stress at times, especially on this, the scene in this photo right here. There was multiple patients in that scene, multiple responders, a lot of things happening very quickly. And then you add a helicopter to the mix, and it just makes everything louder and more chaotic. So the best thing I have found to do is to delegate. If somebody looks like they're lost or maybe not doing as efficient of a job that they could be doing, delegate a job to a person. For me, and I can't speak for everybody, but for me, when I'm on a call, nothing else matters. Like anything else going on in my life, I forget about until I'm off that call. But afterwards, that's the time to kind of think about everything. Think about what all you did, the actions you made, the calls you delegated. And that's a good time to discuss it with your partner. So if for those that don't know, it's on a medical helicopter, it's a pilot. Obviously that is their job. They pilot the aircraft, and then a nurse and a paramedic. So I'm always with somebody else. So it's always good for me to discuss the call with my partner and just ensure that we, did everything we could. We did everything in the right order, and made our very best attempt for that patient. Now, obviously, even best attempts, and Dr. Moran knows sometimes you make your best attempt and you still have a bad outcome. But for me, knowing that I made my best attempt, even though we may have a bad outcome, is I don't want to say it's okay with me, but I feel, I guess, less stressed if I feel that I perform to my highest.
Yeah, Dustin, what you're talking about, in the military, we call it a hot wash. So after you have an exercise or an event, you get everybody together and you talk it through. And we did the same thing as a trauma team. We'd have a patient that died that was, hurt us all, either a young kid or a mother or a father. And you get the whole team together, and then you just would kind of, kumbaya, so to speak. You'd get together and talk about what you did, should we done something different. But it's really important for people like you and I that are in this first responder business, post responder, where you're dealing with this day in and out, an incredible emotional burden of taking care of these people, that the hot wash is truly, it's been shown that's what helps you through to the next day. Because if you don't do that hot wash and release some of that emotion that builds up in these situations, you've seen it. I know you've come into the trauma bay and seen people lose their shit, just the doctors or the nurse, and what typically happens is that builds up, that emotional burden builds and builds. And then if you don't empty that bucket, I always talked on the show, so like a 5-gallon bucket, every little flight that you do, every patient that you saw that I saw, put something into the bucket. It's really hard to drain that bucket. But unfortunately, no matter all the hot washes you do, that bucket fills up. And then one day that bucket's going to spill.
Yeah. And fortunately at GMR and Airevac, we do have dedicated CISM teams, so critical incident stress management teams, peer support programs. So, anybody that's gone through a stressful situation, whether it be a bad call or, saw something bad, even outside of work, those resources are available to our employees to help them through those tough times.
Excellent.
But yeah, you're right about the 5-gallon bucket. I mean, when I'm off work, I'm off work. I take time with my family. I take time for recreation. I try not to dwell on work when I'm off work.
Here's the difference. I dealt with the patient and the stress of all that, but you're dealing with you could fricking die in a helicopter crash while you're trying to save somebody's life. And to me, that's an additional stressor that is just, hats off, chapeau to you for being able to do what you do. Cause I fly in the military, and yeah, it's a lot of excitement, but you're in probably next to a crop duster. There's no more dangerous form of general aviation than what you do. Honestly.
Yeah, there are inherent risks, but again, historically, it's a safe engine. It's safe industry.
Yeah.
Again, there's those risk mitigation tactics that we use, and we do our best to keep ourselves as safe as possible.
And when you look at most aviation crashes, military and civilian, when they're reconstructed and you look back, there was some poor decision making going on in there. And that's why crew resource management CRM is so important, that you all have a voice. So
yeah.
Well, I think everybody listening to the show is going to be convinced that that what you do is awesome. It saves a lot of lives, and I think I hope they sign up for the GMR insurance. So why don't you tell people what it would cost to get this helicopter insurance that I have, that I tell everybody that I know you need this insurance. So why don't you tell people, let them know what the costs are.
Yep. So it's called the Air Care Network membership. It is $99 per year. It covers you and everyone else in your household.
Wait a minute, $99 a year.
And 60 folks age 60 plus get a senior discount.
Hey, there you go, right here, baby.
There you go.
I got the discount.
That's what we're all about, is the discount. Dustin, that's unbelievable, man. That's I mean, not just the cost savings, but just to know that you have it. Just to know that you have it.
It does give very, very strong financial peace of mind in the unfortunate event you ever have to see a medical helicopter anywhere near you.
We spent a little time talking about stress, and you just think about, and like Stefan said, he'd have paid it because it was his wife, no matter what. But, it would certainly add stress to a family on top of what they're dealing with. A loved one who'd been in the hospital, and we hopefully had a successful outcome, then just having to deal with the financial aftermath. So this thing is one way to wipe that off the table.
It's 27 cents a day.
We'll have
Versus
to-
a $40,000 bill.
So for
Wow.
listeners, what's the website or Google, or how do you,
It's,
just repeat that again?
So it's airmedcarenetwork.com. Or you can go to the Airevac Life Team website at lifeteam.net. Click on the membership tab. Either one of those methods will get you to where you need to go. And just a little bit about it. It doesn't just cover Airevac helicopters. It covers every rotor wing program, so helicopter program in the GMR footprint, the Global Medical Response footprint. So essentially it's coast to coast. Again, $99 a year, everybody in your household, and there's a senior rate, discounted rate with that. So
I'm going to get an Airevac tattoo on my forehead. So
Finally, a sponsorship.
we can probably help you with that.
Dustin,
All
I
right.
got to ask before you jump off the call here, you've done a fantastic job. And just again, thank you. Hats off for the lives that you've saved, the lives that you've touched, and that you continue to do it willingly and gleefully. And I think it says a lot about the dangers on our highways for you to choose to fly in a helicopter as opposed to being in an ambulance. I got to assume you were probably among the safest drivers you know. So since this is a car show, what do you drive?
21 GMC Sierra. It's a 1500 A24, and it's got the 3.0 Duramax.
Okay, good one. Good one. And you're always doing the speed limit, and you signal for every turn.
5 under everywhere.
Yeah. And we know you stay in the right lane except to pass.
That's right.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dustin. So
Thank you.
anyway, Stefan, go ahead and wrap us up.
all right, listeners, thank you for once again listening. Or if you're on YouTube watching, remember to like, subscribe, tell your friends all about us. We want to keep this podcast going, and catch us next week.